And it's a Podster pop-up studio at PodFest, and we're having Tamara from Barometer. Tamara is one of the speakers, one of the panel participants at PodFest. Hi, Tamara. How are you today?
I'm doing amazing. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm really happy that the entire industry is at the PodFest today. And how was your panel? What was it about? How do you find this event?
I'm so grateful for the Dubai Press Club for inviting me and for allowing me to participate. I thought the panel was so informative. I've been learning so much from the community. We really had the opportunity to talk about Barometer and how we partner with some of our partners in the region, like Next Broadcast Media. And so it was an amazing opportunity. It's my first time in Dubai.
Oh, really? What was the panel main theme? Let's put it this way. Let's start with this one. Yes.
It was really focused about AI and like what is the future of AI in podcasting and how is it going to change and empower creators and advertisers?
That's an interesting area to explore, isn't it? Because most of the creators are using the existing platforms, but what is it there for them from AI perspective, and what is already like establishedly useful tool?
Yeah, I thought one of the cool things about the panel was the diversity of the participants. So there were podcasters who were speaking to how they use AI in their own creation process to make it easier for them and faster for them to deliver consistently. They talked about how they can use like Descript to edit the transcript and then that it edits the audio. They talked about how they can like use AI tools to generate the social tiles and things like that. And I feel like for platforms and for advertisers, the AI applications are slightly different. Because one of the opportunities now that it's easier to create content with AI is there's more content. And so for advertisers and platforms, it can be really hard to curate that content, to understand what's in that content. That's more the platform part. For the advertiser, they really want to understand what is it that they're buying. They say vet the content. And what's amazing is before AI, somebody had to listen to it. And so, oh, you don't speak Arabic? Can't listen to it, can't measure it. Oh, you're having your intern do it on their lunch break and she's hungry. You just spent 15,000 dirham producing the podcast episode and nobody will ever advertise on it because the intern was hungry. So we help kind of overcome some of those unfortunate realities through efficiencies. And I think that's really the opportunity for AI and podcasting.
So do you think AI is going to transform the podcasting industry overall into a much more powerful medium? And how do you see that happening now in the US, and probably how do you see that happening in the future here?
Yeah, so because of the challenges of the scale and the length of the content, I feel like podcasting has become like special, and people think that podcasting is so special and the content is so unique and the connection with the host is so intimate. And because of that, we actually are creating artificial barriers for entry to advertisers. And so one of the things that we've noticed in the US is podcasting is trying to learn from other more mature channels. So even in the US, which is considered like a more mature podcast market, podcasting is still considered an emerging channel. With less spend going to it than proportionally like listenership. And so one of my challenges is how do we make advertising in podcasts less special, less hard? How do we make it the same process as what people are doing in CTV? And that really allows us to focus on what do the advertisers require. And so Luca Allen was on our panel and he was really speaking to like how important it is for creators to think about what are the advertisers thinking about? And so I think that's kind of the opportunity is how can creators do that? They're not an advertiser. And so one of the cool things about Barometer, in the past, brand safety technologies have not shared the same data with the creators and the advertisers. But we do. We don't have a different platform for publishers. It's all the same.
That's interesting. And how do you see, tools like Barometer helping advertisers advertise more and helping creators overcome the barriers of or limitations of other platforms? How do you see that happening?
Yeah, so in the advertising process, they have like a couple of different sections. They've got planning, and then they've got activation. And then they have post-campaign kind of measurement evaluation, looking at what worked and what didn't work. It's important for a podcaster to be considered at all of the stages of that process. And so in the planning stage, it's about discovery. Different advertisers think about how to find different podcasts in different ways. And I think one of the, in short, they're looking for scale, brand safety, and measurement. And if you're able to accommodate for those things and make it the same process that they take for other channels, then it's easier. So just as an example, many advertisers transact on large global demand-side platforms like the Trade Desk or DV360. In the Trade Desk, there's all of this tooling for buying CTV. You can upload a list of email addresses and it'll help you match it in a clean room so that when your audience is listening, you can match to the right person. It allows you to layer on targeting capabilities like double verify or integral ad sciences so that you can control where your messaging is going. You can layer on geo-targeting, all sorts of different tools. And until literally this quarter, podcasting was excluded from that workflow. You could buy podcasts in the Trade Desk. You could upload your email list, so at least they were there in terms of addressability. But there was no way for an advertiser to predetermine where their content was going to run, on which shows, on which episodes, and actually just on which episodes. You could make like a show level inclusion list, but that still didn't give them enough comfort. And so that's really the opportunity and how it's changing.
Would you share a few specific examples on how, for example, tools like Barometer revolutionize, the limitations? Like, how do we overcome? Like you gave me, when we did like a little discovery conversation, you gave me a few examples of how much great content is being missed.
Yeah.
Just because of the limitations of the legacy systems.
Totally. So the legacy brand safety vendors, I won't name them, but you know who you are, use keywords targeting and anti-targeting. And for example, words have different meanings in different contexts. A really good example that my CRO likes to use is the word fine. His wife tells him it's fine. It's not fine. And just to be able to know in the context of what is actually being said, that's quite important. And so as an example, one of our investors, Hearst, they have weather content. And so one of the example content items that had been blocked by a competitor in another channel was winter storm pummels Hudson Valley. That was somehow determined to not be brand safe. So it was considered the same level as like illegal content, not even on the scale of brand suitability. It's just obviously wrong. As another example, like the news, it's the most blocked category. People just block the news flat out. But there's so much diversity and variety in the news, and it's possible to find non-polarizing news. Furthermore, if we unpack that a little bit more, everything is news. Sports is news. There's entertainment news. And one of the things that happens all the time when people block the genre of news is they block the sports and they block the entertainment. And so I can't tell you how many times we've been like, measuring a podcast campaign and the advertiser says they want to block the news, and then they get the results back and it says you got 12% alignment to your standards. We help them avoid that by saying, this was tagged as the news, but it's actually sports. And so, voila, 99% alignment. And so it can be something as simple as that completely transforms the buying experience.
How is your approach, or how is it enabling to avoid those limitations?
Yeah, so we have a proprietary AI system, and it's called the Barometer Brand Integrity Cloud.
Yeah.
And so what it does is it works with the best transcription partners available on the market to transcribe the content as accurately as possible. Then it analyzes it contextually, looking for discussions of different topics, not keywords, but topics. And then looking around how those topics are talked about from the tone perspective. What do I mean when I say tone? It's measuring for about 30 different emotions. So not sentiment, but more like anger or joy. And so what we're able to do is look at a piece of content like true crime, for example. And we can say, this true crime show is really happy when they're talking about the murder. It seems like that's a little bit interesting, but that's quite common in true crime content. And so they can get really excited, like, it's a perfect crime, a brilliant killer, like things like that. That might not be suitable for every advertiser, but there's tons of true crime that sounds a little bit more like the news, where it's kind of just matter of fact. Even true crime has been used to solve cold cases. So from that perspective, you can really show the variety within a single genre that advertisers maybe wouldn't have been able to glean just by listening to it.
That's interesting. And if we tap into our region specifically, so what sort of difference, what's the major difference that is straight away that is straight away noticeable for you, a person who's working in a different region, area, and seeing different types of content? What do you see as a difference, and is it a potential or something that is about to evolve into something else?
Yeah, I definitely see the word that I would use to describe the vibe here is blossoming. And I feel like there's a lot that I didn't know or understand. And I can imagine so many people in other countries just don't understand what the truth really is and what's actually happening. And so, in a word, like bias, I think that the opportunity is to overcome the biases that exist through data.
Right.
So I think that's kind of the most exciting thing that I'm seeing here is everybody's embracing the tools. Everybody's embracing partnership to elevate together to grow the pie before we slice it. And I think that's really the right idea. And so I'm really excited by all of the moves to bring like US advertisers, for example, into the region and help them understand how do you tailor your message to be relevant locally. As we talked about, it's not just about translating your ad into a different language. It's really about trying to understand what is the culture and how is my message going to reach this community differently than maybe in America. And I do think that that takes exposure and overcoming,
Is Barometer something that can help to analyze not only the language but also the culture and the cultural context, let's say, behind the content?
It's certainly imperfect, but we can try. And so I think that's kind of the biggest opportunities. When I was starting to work with the next broadcast media catalog, I'd always like, oh, you'll be so surprised at the types of content. And one of the findings that we had was there was just a bunch of poetry content, a bunch of art content, philosophy, really educational content, but also like culturally educational. In the States, when you see a society and culture podcast, it's usually like gossip or like not exactly enriching. And so there's a lot of opportunities because for advertisers, they're used to that being society and culture. And so I think there's a lot of opportunities to elevate the conversations that are happening because they're so premium and they're so unique and informative. You can know that the audiences that are being reached by those shows are seeking to learn. And so I think that combination is a really powerful thing. And I think that's really the opportunity for Barometer is to be able to analyze the content and reveal that there's nothing there that could be concerning to advertisers. But furthermore, like forget about the bad stuff. Let's focus on the quality and elevating it through the positives as well.
So, from your conversations with the advertisers here, have you noticed that any interest towards tools like Barometer? Do you see the potential for you to come here quite fast? And probably just to add to this question, do you think this region is ready for tools like Barometer? Do we have enough content to analyze?
It's a great question. I definitely feel like it's growing really fast and you need to get started in order to be ready when it turns on. I think that what's really incredible about the advertisers in this region is they're really mature brands. That's very unique. It's not the same in the States where the typical brands that had started advertising in podcasts were like performance marketers. They're quite large brands, but it's not like Samsung or GE or things like that, Unilever. And what we've learned is that the reason that those brands didn't start investing early on is because there was no investment made in the brand safety aspects of how they could buy. And so that was just part of their standard process. It wasn't met. And so performance marketers took that opportunity to reach this premium audience without any of those safeguards. And that's great. And they will continue doing that. But I think it's also what's amazing about this region is that you already have the connections and the programmatic integrations. And even though the spend isn't that big yet, it's coming from these premium players. And so I think there really is a lot of potential here to do it right from the onset, rather than now trying to fix it after it's already been done incorrectly, which I really feel like in the States, it took us some time to kind of turn over. I believe last year was the first year that brand advertisers outspent performance marketers in the US. I don't think that's the same in any other region. And so I think while you guys are ahead, we should continue that momentum and really capitalize on it.
That's interesting, and I think that's great. It's coming from you, definitely. There's a lot of experience coming into place in terms of how to develop an AI tool, etc., and especially how you can apply this tool towards a developing industry. It is definitely the knowledge that we need in the region, the knowledge that needs to help this region develop into a more mature and a more safe environment for brands to advertise in? And maybe one of the last questions to wrap it up, how do you think brands are tapping into or should tap into podcasting? If it's not special, maybe it should not be just podcasting, maybe anything that is a content creation. How do you think brands need to tap into that?
Yeah, I feel like more and more brands are realizing that they need to be able to have emerging channels as part of their media mix. And I feel like it's really important to consider it from the planning perspective. Why should you add podcasts? Oh, well, one angle is the incremental reach. You're reaching a new audience that you couldn't reach with traditional channels. Another angle is the on-demand activation, where it's not the same as TV, where it's just playing and then you go to the bathroom during the ad. It's in your ears. And so I think that's really the opportunity. Yeah.
So two things, audio and emerging channels. Let's call it podcasting, or maybe it will be like a series of, might not be, maybe a broadcasting or something like that.
Yeah. And I feel like, there's also kind of a difference. Like, I wouldn't actually group like sponsoring Instagram creators and sponsoring podcasts in the same bucket of spend. I would rather group podcasting with CTV as a more premium and elevated qualified spend. And one of the trends that we're seeing is there's less money going to these walled garden social platforms and more money going back to the open internet. It's flipping again. And one of the drivers for that is social media is bad for society. And so it has social harms for the children. There's so many challenges, and it has because it's a closed platform, they also don't make any guarantees. Advertisers can't really tell like what happened. They have no way of knowing if they lied to them or not. And so I think that's another really big opportunity for podcasting. It's on the open internet.
Yeah. So do you think just because you've just mentioned something very, very important about podcasting being totally different from social media, it's not harming, let's say, because the content is long and it's being consumed as you would imagine. For example, back in the days we used to go to the library and read a book. It will be went for a movie and watched a movie, right? So podcasting, from that perspective, we can compare it to a proper medium like that versus social media. Do you see podcasting staying there for many, many years more, but probably evolving? And how do you see podcasting evolve in the nearest future?
Yeah, I feel like one of the interesting observations is there's about maybe 50 to 100,000 shows that are receiving 98% of all the money. But there's over 300,000 active podcasts. So I think the big opportunity is there will always be that premium cohort and it'll always continue to get elevated. But how do you tap the quote unquote long tail? I think that's like a really big opportunity. And I really think that programmatic is the answer. And so I think that's kind of going to be the future. It's going to be, how do we continue monetizing and making more premium this inventory that is premium? We can imagine in 5 years, these people will be celebrities like TV stars. And also at the same time, there will be an even larger growing cohort of qualified creators. It's not the same thing as there's TikTok post. And those people will also be able to be monetized in a similar way, kind of following in the footsteps of these large mega podcasters.
But do you think this has to be centralized or decentralized from the perspective like, okay, so then let's take all the potential creators who've got their own voice and let's help them become celebrities. So this is the centralized way for me. Decentralized is you allow this medium to develop the way it's natural for the medium rather than, it feels natural for you. So what do you think? I mean, it's more of a philosophical question, frankly speaking. It's not about like you need to know the answer.
I think it's interesting. I think that podcasting in its essence is decentralized because it's open and the open RSS. And so what I think is amazing about programmatic is you can continue to host your podcast anywhere and practice however you want, but you can still be included in a central way of being monetized. And so I think that's really the opportunity, is you don't have to choose. And I think that you can continue being like really an individual. But what's cool is for example, in CTV, there's 8 networks. That's it. Everything is centralized and they own them and that's it. And what's amazing about podcasting is there's just like hundreds of thousands of independent people. And so I feel like the centralization is necessary to make it easier for the advertisers to buy it. But that doesn't mean that anything has to really change in the ecosystem. It's more about just like connecting the pipes so that from an advertiser perspective, they don't have to know. Like we hear this all the time. I want to buy Spotify. What do you want to buy on Spotify? Oh, I want to buy this podcast. Oh, that podcast is actually rep by Acast. So that experience from a buyer's perspective, they don't actually care who it's repped by. We care. And that's another thing that makes podcasting special. And so that's just one example of how you can create this artificial barrier that doesn't have to be there.
Thank you very much, Tamara. I think I could continue this conversation. So I'm really, really happy to have you in the region. So come again. And let's talk more about how not to make podcasting special.
I love it. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.